Thanks so much for joining us today. It's so good to have you back on. Now, before we get into our episode today, why don't you take a couple of minutes to subscribe to my Substack? You can get some news updates, my analysis on the world and politics, updates on whatever is going on. And ideally, the goal is to one day have a newsletter come 3 times a week. We are still working on making that happen just logistically. But while we're doing that, you can add your name to the list just so you know what's going on in the world of politics. It's a great way to stay in touch with the show. Another way to stay in touch with us is by following us on Instagram. You can follow at the Ishan S Show. You can, I clip episodes and post those clips there. So if you miss an episode or you want a fun moment from the show or some big piece of analysis, it's another great way to stay in touch. You can also follow me at Real Ishan Shrivastava on Instagram. I'm also technically on TikTok right now. I just launched TikTok, so you can go follow me on TikTok at the same handle. And you can follow me on Blue Sky at ishanshrivastava.bluesky.social. Okay, we have been talking about this topic for a very, very long time. It is the big, ugly bill. This is Donald Trump's signature policy. It is the thing that he ran on. It is the thing that he made the last presidential election about. And it passed in the House. We talked about how it passed in the House, and we talked about the really damaging aspects of when it came out of the House. And it was not great. It was pretty bad what the House Republican leadership had managed to put out. Now, we knew going into the process, because once it was done with the House, it came to the Senate. We knew going into that process it wasn't going to look pretty, because the Senate had very different ideas of what things to look at, what things should have been examined. At the end of the day, none of it was very good. Some parts of it were cuts. Other people wanted more cuts. But when we got the House version, that House version of the big, ugly bill had plans such as taking people off of food assistance. It had provisions that made sure that 11 million people were cut off of their health care. And that was in itself a pretty shocking thing. It extended the Trump tax cuts from 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that gives tax breaks to rich folks, takes away from people who don't make as much. It is, in general, just a piece of policy that Donald Trump championed, but it was not in its permanent or in its final draft stage, I guess, when it left the House. And when it was leaving the House, it was supposed to cost roughly $3 trillion in terms of overall spending being added to the deficit. Now, I remember Republicans were all about not adding to the deficit, so I don't know where things really changed, but, you know, they add to the deficit. So it left the House, and for the past month or so, it's been all about what gets planned in the Senate, how this bill goes through in the Senate. That has been a really interesting process to watch, because in general, where you would have thought that the Senate was a bit more of the moderating force, the Senate actually ended up being the place where even more damaging things were put into the big, ugly bill. And so yesterday, the Senate passed a version of the big, ugly bill that was different from the House version, but in fact expanded on some of that stuff. And so I covered some of that on Instagram and TikTok, so another reason to follow us there. I talked about some of it. I gave some authentic, in real-time analysis of all the stuff that was going on. But there's more that we should be talking about. I think first and foremost, what it's worth mentioning is the deficit. Like I said, Republicans have so claimed to be the party of fiscal responsibility. They are the party that claims that we should not spend, that we should save money, that has always been concerned about the national debt. It's all in name only. None of it. They don't really care. For example, the House version of the big, ugly bill that we originally got added about $3 trillion to the debt. The Senate version, edited, earmarked, all of the changes made, now is estimated to cost roughly $3.5 trillion to $4 trillion over the next 10 years. How much more it adds to our debt. Somehow Republicans, the party of fiscal responsibility, are adding to our debt. They are ballooning it by adding these disastrous spending policies that are not going to help average Americans. Remember how we talked about 11 million people getting removed from their health care off of Medicaid? Well, now we're looking down the barrel of 17 million people getting removed from their Medicaid. Senate Republicans just got really excited and they're like, oh boy, more people to cut off. And so they expanded that number by 6 million like it doesn't matter. And there are lists out there of how many people are expected to lose their coverage. Roughly 1 million people in Florida, 500,000 people in Illinois, 2 million people in California. They say that they're putting in things like work requirements into this, but in reality, when you're looking at it, their general idea is that the people they are cutting off of these programs are people that sit at home all day, that people that don't work. When in reality, that is just not the truth. It is an ignorant image painted by the right of people who are on these programs. I don't know what part of the Republican Party does not seem to understand that these programs are designed to lift people up. They are designed to give people, that's why they're called a safety net, the social safety net. They are designed to lift people up when they need that support. The government comes in and provides that support. Republicans are hell-bent on painting an image that somehow there are 17 million people in this country, 17 million people. Think about that. We have 300 million people. About what? Like 13 or 17 million of the people in this country are all sitting at home stealing benefits. Be so for real right now. That is not the case. That is simply unfair. It is an unfair assumption. Anyway, whatever. They are kicking 17 million people off, and somehow Republicans were able to stomach such a thing. But beyond that, what's more interesting to me is that those cuts are going to disproportionately impact their own voters. Let's talk about rural communities. Thanks to this big, ugly bill and what it does to Medicaid, we expect many people in rural communities specifically to be taken off of healthcare, off of Medicaid. Now, why that matters is the issue of rural hospitals. Rural hospitals, usually the only source of medical care for miles in some parts of this country, they rely on Medicare dollars. They rely on these dollars to actually stay afloat because, you know, it takes money to do things. Republicans are funneling that money away from Medicaid, sending it to their billionaire friends for tax cuts. All the while, rural hospitals shut down because Medicaid dollars are no longer going to go to rural hospitals. That risks these hospitals closing down. And what that means, what it means that these hospitals are shutting down is that people in these communities are not going to get the medical care they need. In a desperate moment, in an emergency, Republicans are now expecting rural families, their own voters in many cases, their own voters, to go travel 30 minutes to go to another hospital because the one close to them shut down. That is the reality that they are painting with this big, ugly bill. Here's another thing. They're talking about cutting food benefits, nutritional assistance. That cuts off, that is going to impact seniors. That is going to affect veterans. Republicans are the party of veterans, they claim. That they're the party of veterans. Republicans are the ones, Doge, when Elon Musk was conducting his reign of terror over the federal government, they cut veterans' healthcare benefits. And now they are cutting Medicaid, which I'm sure is going to impact at least some segment of it, veterans. They're cutting nutritional benefits for veterans. So much about lifting our nation's troops, our people that have served this country, so much they say that they do. Yet at the same time, they take away food benefits. Feeding kids. Because kids are somehow now gaming the system. Kids are scamming the welfare system because they now want handouts. I mean, this type of bill is going to affect things like free school lunches. Lunches, food for kids to eat. I mean, what part of the Republican agenda actually looks hard at what it is that's going to happen? I mean, beyond that, they're making more. There's more stuff that we can talk about, but endlessly, the stuff that they are cutting. Here's something to note. Studies link these types of cuts to increases in crime and instability in vulnerable communities. When you cut off resources that lift populations, you see increases in crime. You see increases in community struggles. So I don't know if Republicans are really all about the end game and helping their billionaire friends, but it's coming at a significant cost. It's going to cost people in big cities. It is going to cost people in rural America. It is going to affect so many people. It's going to affect their own voters. It's going to affect voters in blue states. I mean, it is indiscriminate in how much it is going to negatively hurt people. So naturally, the Senate voted on this, and it was a very close thing. Democrats first had the whole bill get read. That took a really long time. And then they got into the amendments process. So in the Senate, after once you get into that discussion, then you can add amendments to the bill. And that is basically the changes that are made to the House version of the bill. And so Democrats started introducing amendments, and they call it a vote-a-rama. And so that ran on for a while. And then they finally voted. And in that vote, it was 50-50. And J.D. Vance, the vice president, obviously with his power as vice president, broke the tie. And so it passed 51-50 yesterday, with Vice President Vance voting to affirm all of these things: cuts to Medicaid, cuts to food assistance, cuts to all sorts of things. They reduced so many things. It is ridiculous. Obviously, Donald Trump and his party were all about happy. Now, there was internal dissent within the Republican ranks. You might know that the Senate split is 53-47 for Republicans, and so 50-50 doesn't, you're like, where did the votes go? So 3 Republicans voted no on this bill. Those senators are Senator Rand Paul, Senator Thom Tillis, and Senator Susan Collins. Senator Rand Paul voted no because of the deficit implications. I mean, I guess to give him some credit, he stuck with his guns. He wanted more cuts, which still seems, it's still heartless in a sense, but to his credit, he stuck with his guns and he voted down this bill because the fiscal implications of this type of spending is going to undoubtedly expand the disparities in our country. It is going to provide unpaid tax cuts for rich people at our expense. Senator Susan Collins was eventually pressured into voting no for this. There were calls made, there was external pressure being put on her, and so eventually she did also vote no on this, but she was a swing vote that everyone was keeping an eye on. The last senator that voted no, Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina, this was the interesting one. I like to say that Senator Thom Tillis was the first political casualty of this whole thing. Senator Thom Tillis was not on board with passing this bill. He was not excited about it. He really, there were many things in this, particularly the Medicaid stuff, particularly the fact that people were being stripped of their health care, that really irked him in his home, and it would be 600,000 or so in North Carolina, his home state. He's up for re-election next year. And mind you, Thom Tillis is no whatever, like, savior of moderate politics. Like, this is the guy that voted for Pete Hegseth. This is a guy that voted for a lot more of the Trump agenda the first time around. So he's not completely like rid of any of the things that that he's done. But here you have to hand it to him. He stuck with his guns. And he said, I am not voting for bad policy that is going to hurt millions of Americans. I'm not going to vote for a policy that hurts people in my state. I'm not going to vote to remove people from their health care. He said that. Donald Trump, in a tweet or a Truth Social post, called him out and also issued his not so veiled threat of challenging him in the primary. And Thom Tillis really gave it a thought. First, he voted no to proceed with the motion. So first you have to actually agree to proceed with the motion in the Senate, and then you vote on the actual bill. Thom Tillis voted not to proceed with that motion. So it was after that that Donald Trump posted the Truth Social post. And then after that started swirling, he announced pretty abruptly that he would no longer be running for re-election, that this next 2 years will be his last 2 years in the Senate. He didn't cave. He did not just give in. He said, if I have to vote again, if he had to choose between the people of North Carolina and he had to choose between his home state, and he decided, or his political career. And it's sad, it's pathetic that this is where the Republican Party is, that they have to choose between the people of their state and their political futures. Thom Tillis was one of the ones that decided to vote for the people of his state and vote against this bill. But it is sad, it is disappointing that we have a political party that is at such a whim, where so many people privately will criticize the things in this bill. They know so well that this is going to cost them dearly in the midterms. But Donald Trump doesn't have much of an interest. He just has this whole, I want to be a change man. I want to do all this stuff. And so he decided that it was okay that we cut people off of their Medicare. So these people were stuck, the Republican elected members of Congress were stuck in this tight line. So Donald Trump threatening to primary them scared a lot of them in the line. Another senator is Senator Josh Hawley. Josh Hawley went as far as to write a New York Times op-ed begging Republicans to actually save Medicare, to not cut it, because people in his state of Missouri also rely on these benefits. He went as far as to do that. And he voted for this bill. But then he's like, I really am not happy about it. Like, it's not a good bill, blah, blah, blah. But you still voted for it. You still voted for it. And then there's Senator Lisa Murkowski. She has probably sparked the most criticism from both sides, for that matter. But she was the last swing vote. So when people ask, could this bill have failed? The answer is yes, it very much could have failed, and it depended on Lisa Murkowski's vote. Senator Lisa Murkowski was not a fan of the bill, and you know, because if you know her voting record, you know that she was not very comfortable with all of this. She wasn't, because this is just not the type of thing that she would vote for. But we learned that it got worked into the bill, protections for her home state of Alaska and Hawaii from a lot of these cuts, a lot of these things. She managed to work that in. And so when you think about it as a delegate for her state, yes, she was able to vote for this bill to protect her state, but that came at the cost of all the other 48. It came at the cost of millions of people. Millions of people are going to lose their benefits, but she managed to save her state. She managed to save her state from the tragedy that this country can face if this bill does get passed. Here, so Senator Rand Paul said that she scored a bailout for her state. She didn't take very kindly to it, so she had some criticism to make, but she also justified her voting for the bill. Take a look.
Do I like this bill? No, because I tried to take care of Alaska's interests. But I know that in many parts of the country, there are Americans that are not going to be advantaged by this bill. I don't like that. I don't like the fact that we moved through an artificial deadline, an artificial timeline, to produce something, to meet a deadline, rather than to actually try to produce the best bill for the country. But when I saw the direction that this is going, you can either say, I don't like it, not try to help my state, or you can roll up your sleeves and do so.
So she said she didn't like the bill, but she still voted for it. If you don't like the bill, then don't vote for the bill. Anyway, Democrats can't do much. They can't. They really needed the Republican backlash. They needed the Republican dissent to actually do anything. So Democrats have been hitting the airwaves criticizing the big ugly bill as much as they can. I mean, as best as they can. But, they're pretty much powerless in all of this. And it's unfortunate that that's where we are. But if we ask the American people are not happy with this bill. We have polling. I talked about a Fox News poll last week, which said that roughly 40% of Americans support this bill, but a large majority of 60%, nearly 60% don't. They don't support the cuts to Medicare. They don't support the cuts to food assistance. They don't support the cuts to rural hospitals. They don't support the cuts to veterans and to seniors losing access to food. They don't support that. Despite that, Republicans still voted for it. That is, they voted for it because party line is what matters. Party line is what matters in this day and age of Republican politics. It doesn't matter if you are going to remove people from their ability to raise families. It doesn't matter if you're going to stop kids from going hungry. It doesn't matter if you're going to provide benefits to a family that needs medical care, health care. It doesn't matter. If the party bosses say you have to vote for this bill or you have to pick between your future and that, you're going to pick your future. That's Republican politics now. That's what it is. And it's sad. It's sad that that's the case. So next up, since edits were made in the Senate version of this bill, it's going to go back to the House, and the House now has to vote. And I've been following members of Congress on social media who have been frantically trying to arrange flights to go back to DC, but there have been a lot of delays because it's a big long holiday weekend. So flights are getting canceled across the board. So it has become a little complicated to get all of this done. But people are flying back in as of the recording of this. And I feel like by the time this episode is live, we might have a House vote on this. But if not, there is a deadline that President Trump, an arbitrary deadline that President Trump has put, which is the 4th of July, this Friday, to get the bill passed. He looked in the calendar and he's like, okay, we're going to pick July 4th to get this bill passed and I will sign it into law. Because of that, they are trying their best to do this. But it seems like there are some Republicans in the House who are also not happy with this. And again, there's two sides to this equation. There's obviously the side of Republicans that want to see more spending cuts. They want to see more people suffer. They want to see more people get hurt. And then there's the side of the House where they're not enthused by the expansion of cuts. They are not enthused by, the 17 million people now getting cut from their Medicare. So the dissent, it seems like, is there. So maybe people calling their representatives, telling them to vote no might help. Who knows? But any amendments that are made in the House version, so if the House decides to change things or decides that, things need to be whatever, then it would have to go back to the Senate. And they will keep doing this back and forth until two identical pieces of legislation go to each chamber of Congress. So we have to watch for a few things. First, we have to watch for House, the GOP unity in the House. We have to watch for that. We have to see what types of changes do end up getting made, because I don't know. I don't feel like Republicans are going to be able to whip up the votes to do more cuts than they already did. I mean, it was quite the challenge for Speaker Mike Johnson to actually get this bill through when it initially came through. It was a challenge. Now, again, I don't know how easy that's going to be. So I feel like there will be changes. Next thing we have to watch for is the optics. 2026 is just around the corner. If this bill passes, changes are going to happen very quickly. Changes are going to happen very quickly. And Republicans are going to have to defend it. I don't know how the American people are going to willingly sign on to half the things that they've done. I get this gut feeling they won't. But Republicans have to defend it. And when it comes to the topic of optics, Republicans kind of have a I don't care, la-di-da attitude. So we'll see how they do. And then lastly, we have to see this deadline. Everything that needs to happen will happen before the next episode of this show. And we still do twice a week. I might not do this Saturday, might take the 4th weekend off. But whenever this new episode comes out, by then we will be talking about either the failed vote, or we'll be talking about the law of the land of removing people from healthcare. I hope I have gotten into your head exactly what this bill does. If not, we can review it one more time. It's going to cut 17 million people off of healthcare in its current form. It is going to take people off of food assistance and food benefits. It's going to take veterans, seniors, and kids off of food benefits. It is going to hurt rural hospitals because Medicaid dollars go straight to rural hospitals. It is going to hurt you and me, and it's going to hurt so many people every day because this precipitating effects of hurting so many different groups of people will expand to every part of the country. Like, everyone will feel the pain of it. It's going to give tax cuts to the richest Americans while, funding these types of cuts at the expense of poorer Americans. It is going to cut back on environmental protections. It is going to expand our deficit, our debt by $4 trillion, which young folks like you and me, we're going to have to reconcile with as we get older. That's just some of it. That's just some of it. And we'll be keeping a watch on all of what they decide to do. And if this bill does get passed, we'll have to watch the effects, but the effects will be very quick. So we'll be keeping an eye on all of that. So keep following us here, keep watching the show, keep yourself informed on the stuff that's going on. It feels like things change. We get new facts about the bill every single day. So keep watching the show, keep learning, keep yourself informed on all that they're gonna do, because it's the best we can do right now. Anyway, that's all we have for today. If you liked my commentary, then please subscribe to the Sean S. Show on YouTube. And while you're at it, why don't you add your name to my Substack? You can go using the QR code on your screen if there is one, or the link, or you can just look up the Sean S. Show on Substack and you'll find me there. You can add your name to our newsletter. You can follow me on social media. You can follow me at Real Ishan Shrivastava on Instagram, and you can follow me at ishanshrivastava.bluesky.social, and you can follow the show here at the Ishan S. Show on Instagram. All right, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, keep yourself informed. I'll see you in the next one.